when we begin, I have to say first a word of thanks, and that is to Dr. Msgr, because when Msgr Cafone died rather suddenly in 2015, it was almost immediately that Dr. Msgr said to me, we need to establish a memorial lecture. And the first one was that year, 2015. And over the course of each year, the subject matter has been, in a sense, all over the place, because it seems fitting, because as anyone who knew Msgr Cafone knew that his interests were everywhere, and interested in so many things, deep things like spirituality, which of course was his great love, but also teaching and theology and food and his background, which is not only Italian but German. And so there's been a wealth of topics that the Memorial Lecture Series have covered. And so it's important to say thank you to Dr. Msgr, who I know was a dear, dear friend of Msgr Cafone's. And even after 8 years now, for those, of course, of us who knew him, he's greatly missed. And we're very fortunate that his name is in the gallery outside because of the generous donation of one of the board members of the Board of Regents, who, even though he was studying in business school as a student here many years ago, said it had to be named after my favorite teacher. And so it is good that we continue the memory of Msgr Cafone, who was such an extraordinary priest and a powerful preacher and a master teacher. And so we gather today, again, and this time we're going to really spread our wings, and as St. John Paul II said, that we have two wings that we fly on, as he wrote in Veritatis Splendor, both reason and theology, but also, and of course from his lips, the powerful expression about the church breathing with two lungs, with the east and the west. And here we have such an extraordinary, in those days, of course, young woman, who, coming from the Byzantine tradition, entered the Sisters of Charity. And so, with one foot in the Eastern Church and then another now in the Western Church, she gave her short life to the Lord and to the Sisters of Charity. And we want to welcome them, Father Bertha, who is here to offer us some interesting points on her life and what she can mean for us in 2023. Sister Maureen in the back was reminding me that it's 100 years now that marks Sister's graduation from their college, St. Elizabeth's. And so here's somebody who, although was alive really 100 years ago, she really claims our attention. And it's so interesting because really when we look at the calendar of the saints, that's what they all do. Even saints who walked the earth 1,500 years ago and even more, they still are powerful examples for us, and the church continually holds them up for us in our memory so that we can learn from them, follow their example. And so, possibly there's no one better who's going to give our lecture than Father, who certainly has great credentials. His doctorate comes in art history, but of course, here we have a priest who studies art history. And so that history of art is immersed in the theology of the Lord and His church. And so from your experiences, Father, not only in parish work, but in retreat work, and also in your writings and your lectures, you come to us as a good lecturer, as we know from the last time we were here, just about a year ago, when we heard you talk about iconography. And so, without further ado, I want to offer that a warm welcome to you, Father. God bless you. Thank you.
Glory to Jesus Christ. Glory to Him forever. I'm delighted to be here at Seton Hall University. That Seton is a royal name, if you're not aware of. Mother Elizabeth Ann Seton is the first Catholic saint. She founded the Sisters of Charity. She was the name given to this university. It's the foundation of the first American order of Catholic nuns in the United States. And it's also where our Byzantine Ruthenian Teresa Danielovich was from this church. And I'm honored to be here to be able to speak about her because I'm the priest in her birthing parish. And tomorrow is the 122nd anniversary of her baptism and chrismation, or confirmation, in the Byzantine Church of St. John the Baptist in Bayonne. She was chrismated and baptized in a church that's on Avenue H, which is where the location of Lidl's is in Bayonne presently, which is a pretty good store. Among the standard oil, gas tanks and oil tanks, whatever you call them. And she grew up, and she's a Jersey girl, as we advertised. And you hear of a New Yorker speaking about her this afternoon. She died simultaneously, Byzantine and Roman. She never had a change of rite, which is absolutely compelling to me. And it mirrors my own upbringing, if I may interject at the beginning of this talk. My own upbringing was amidst the wonderful solace, the nourishment, the consolation of the Roman Church. I'm 100% thoroughbred Byzantine Ruthenian. We'll get to Ruthenian in a minute. Born third generation here in the United States of America. I attended Roman Catholic school. I was told in the 5th grade I was blessing myself the wrong way, which is not the right way to say, God help us. It's an alternative way. We start on the right. And I grew up going to Roman Catholic grammar school. I went to Roman Catholic high school. I went to Roman Catholic school. I went to a very important crossroads in my life was when I was leaving high school and going into college, into university, which was Fordham. And I was going into the Irish Catholic Priests Rectory in Long Island, where I was growing up. And Father Malloy, of blessed memory, was bringing me in to sign me up to go to the Roman Catholic Seminary, Long Island in Huntington. And my father, God rest his soul, was there with me in the office. And I just opined to Monsignor Malloy. I said, I'm Byzantine. I have to go become a Byzantine priest. And my father, out in the parking lot, broke out in tears. And he said, Joseph, you made me so proud that you wanted to be a priest. And thank the Lord, he lived to see me ordained a priest in 1980 and died 2 years afterwards. So, I progressed. I became a priest. I'm a priest ordained almost 43 years. I was in Buffalo, New York, which is a gigantic Roman Catholic Irish population, as you can imagine. I made friends with Father Bill Quinlivan. He's got the map of Ireland all over his face. Why don't you come, Joe, and learn how to do the Roman Mass? Why don't you come and pray the Mass in St. Luke's Mission of Mercy for the Poor? And he says, it's easy for you, compared to complicated Byzantine liturgy. So I said, okay. I learned how to do the Mass, and I have most rewarding experiences of my life being both Byzantine and Roman. And I find the Lord calling me throughout my vocation and throughout my life to be what we call in English, the interlocutor. Bringing people together, different groups of people together, that normally would not come together. And I find, to my astonishment, even in this day and age, Roman Catholics don't know about Byzantines, and Byzantines stay away from Romans. And I'm going, what happened to this? So I'm just transfixed with the information about Blessed Miriam Teresa, that she died simultaneously, Byzantine and Roman, in her final profession in the case of danger of death in April 1927. She died without changing her rite. So she had the fullness, as Father pointed out to, the two lungs of the Catholic Church. And I always felt an identity with that growing up. It's like a chore. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's a burden, to do this. And so I hope to enlighten you to some from our Byzantine perspective, because we hear most of the writings about Blessed Miriam Teresa are from the Roman perspective. And I'd like to give you a few insights that reveal her Byzantineness, which was indirect and subtle, and hopefully for the future, something important for us as Catholics to be involved with, breathing with both lungs. Because if you're breathing with one lung, you're handicapped, as we know. You need lung function. And our poor Holy Father, we remember him with a lung condition as he's in the hospital, and we're offering up prayers for him, and we offer his protection to Blessed Miriam Teresa Danielovich and to her care. She was born on 26 March, which was just this past Sunday. It was her birthday, or as we say in Bertha talk, her birthday, as the Irish would say to me. Oh, it's your birthday, Father Bertha. Okay? So there's always this nice thing. I love that about the Irish. God bless the Irish. They know how to laugh at themselves. We other nations in the world of our country, we don't know how to laugh at ourselves. The punning that I go through, I've been over Ireland many times, giving retreats over there to the Irish priest who could talk your ear off in 5 minutes more than you would take in 5 years to learn. And that's blessing. And then they pun. They make self-deprecatory remarks. And they make you feel at ease. And this is God's providence. And we're about to see how that occurred in Blessed Miriam Teresa's life in Bayonne, because it's probably not known to many of us, and not known to even many of us Byzantines. She was born of 2 European parents that immigrated here in 1884. It's unclear whether they came just for financial gain in the United States of America and to return back from Austria-Hungary, it was, until 1918, when Austria-Hungary fell apart, and 27 or so nations, and go through the list, it's from everybody from A to Z, including Americans, were part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They were in charge. They were not treated too well by the empire, because we were off on the fringe, but we have, as our Ruthenian sponsors, which were the sponsors of our Byzantine or Greek Catholic Church, headquartered in Uzhhorod, which is in present-day Ukraine, right across the border from Slovakia and Hungary. And they include people from all those nations, and then Slavic nations and non-Slavic nations, but all of the Eastern Rite. Ruthenians, we come from the stock of St. Cyril and Methodius. And that was the 9th century that we were Christianized. They came as evangelizers of the Slavs. In fact, our blessed St. John Paul II called them the evangelizers of not only the Slavs, but of Europe, and then by extension of the whole world. They taught us how to evangelize. Translate the scriptures into the language. Translate the liturgy into the language. But the Cyril-Methodius brought us the Byzantine version of the Catholic faith rather than the Roman version, which was way to our advantage because our people, mostly mountain dweller shepherds living in the hills, were captivated by this singing and this chants that we have. Even today, you can go visit churches in Romania, in Ukraine, in the mountains, and hear the singing. My church in St. Mary's in Jersey City, we have some third or fourth generation immigrants there that sing from the mountains in Slovakia, and they have such devotion and soul. Cyril-Methodius must have been delighted when they came among our ancestors there and brought the Byzantine version, the Eastern line of the church. Cyril-Methodius went to Rome and had the Pope approve our liturgy. They gave us the alphabet, the Cyrillic alphabet, about modeled on Greek. They gave the spirit of, in about the year 1880, our people began to immigrate to the United States. And it was 40, 50 years after the Irish were dismissed, expelled is probably the better word, from the mining industry. Because the Irish were trying to stand up for rights for miners, a union, adequate wages, doctor care, so forth. And they were expelled with the mauling of miners. And plus the anti-Catholicism in the United States at the late 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. It's amazing, some of the books and newspapers, what was written. I read in 1900, only 13% of America was Catholic. And you can imagine these people coming from Europe 50 years after the Irish fled and came to New York and were able to speak English, and they got all those fireman jobs and policeman jobs and everything, and that's why so many people of Irish heritage perished in September 11th. And that left that openings for people to recruit from the white, and I'm sorry to be so explicit, but it's the truth, white people that could work as slaves in the mines. And so it's confusing why, I don't blame I have a great-grandfather that came. And he worked in the mines, he worked his way, and he moved back in 1922 to Europe. So I have relatives galore and hungry today to visit with. So my own personal family mirrors that of Miriam Teresa, so I can identify with her. I know she's the youngest of 7 children. Her older brother, was the next older child. His father, Charles, he became a priest. The 2 youngest ones became called to vocations. Miriam Teresa's first memory is of church burning, our parish church burning, in 1904. She was 3 years young, and she was looking out the window and watching people bringing investments from the church so that they'd be rescued from the fire. We have a movie of this. Can you believe this? It was Standard Oil Company, so they had all these tanks there, and then somebody took a film. I didn't even know they had film in the 1800s. But we have a clip from Library of Congress that shows our church from the side view of where she was living. Her parents moved from New York. After 3 months being in New York, they came to Bayonne and were equipped by the parish priests who were roaming. They weren't living all the time in the area. So early priests were roaming from parish to parish, so that means that they were having liturgies at different times of the day. And you can imagine in 1900 it was quite a trip to roam from different cities, even in New Jersey and New York. They were provided with a parish home to rent, and they took up in that house, in that residence, and lived there. After 2 weeks' arrival in Bayonne, their firstborn child died, unfortunately, tragically. He was only 6 months or 3 weeks or whatever old, and then they gave birth to and had 4 surviving children. Another one died in childbirth. So you can imagine this first generation, they were speaking English in school. She was going to Bayonne High School, she went to Bayonne Grammar School, and years older than her, were the only two really left at home. In 1916, they were hit with an unfortunate experience that is what leads me to tell you something about awful that happened in the Byzantine church, in the Byzantine world. And so this part of the talk is called The Tale of Two Cities. It's a tale of two cities, Minneapolis and Bayonne, and it's about two Ruthenians. We have Alexis Toth, father, who was from Slovakia in Minneapolis, and we have Blessed Teresa in Bayonne, New Jersey, 15 years young. And we have two Irishmen, one named Bishop John Ireland, guess what nationality he was, in Minneapolis. And we had Father Joseph Dolan, the pastor of St. Vincent de Paul, magnificent Roman Catholic church in Bayonne, which you all need to visit because it's a countrywide historical relic. It has Irish stained glass from Harry Clark in the sanctuary from 1929. Unfortunately, me and Teresa never saw them because she was dead already. The Lord called her, but the church and the parish was Irish and provided a home for her. So we get back to this tale of two cities, and I'm talking about the distinction between evangelization and proselytization. Okay? Many times these two words are confused as equal in meaning, but they are not at all. In 1891, Alexis, and this was way before we had any bishops. We didn't have a Ruthenian bishop in the United States until 1924. The Ukrainians received one in 1924 in Philadelphia. We received one from Europe in Pittsburgh. That is a defining moment. You have a bishop, you can go to the bishop, ask you to help you with the parish. Before that, we had 40 years of it. I hate to say, but it was probably a free-for-all. I don't know how these priests were coming over. They were building churches. They were under different trustees, lay people. All of our parishioners had pay. They were earning at poverty level earnings in their jobs. They weren't able to afford any of these places to build, and they built our first Greek Catholic Byzantine churches in Shenandoah, Pennsylvania. In the 1880s, I believe it was. So it's a historical site for all of us in the United States of America. But, there was you're supposed to go to the Roman bishop and report to him, and they were supposed to happen. Well, unfortunately, when Alexis Toth, who was from Slovakia, in Prešov, where the bishop was, came to our John Ireland in Minneapolis for his audience, it was an awful experience. And we have a record of the conversation, which was held in Latin. Can you imagine? And the first question out of Archbishop Ireland's mouth was, "Have you a wife?" "No." "But you had one?" "Yes, I'm a widower." At this, he threw the paper on the table and loudly exclaimed, "I have already written to Rome protesting against this kind of priest being sent to me." "What kind of priest do you mean?" "Your kind. I am a Catholic priest of the Greek rite. I am a uniate. I was ordained by a lawful Catholic bishop. I do not consider either you or this bishop of yours Catholic. Besides, I do not need any uniate priest here. A Polish priest in Minneapolis is sufficient. The Greek Catholics can also have him for their priest. But he belongs to the Latin rite. Our people do not understand him. They will hardly go to him. That is why they built a church of their own. I gave them no permission to build, and I shall grant you no permission to work there. The Archbishop lost his temper. I lost mine just as much. One word brought another, so the thing has gone so far that our further conversation is not worth putting on record. Now, Of course, with a heated discussion like this, there's going to be two sides to it. It's a divorce. It's what we call in the church a schism. Two Catholics talking to each other and not communicating. And so it began what I call the Toth schism, although you won't find that in a book described as that. But Toth got on his high horse and went out on the train. Notice this was 1890. I think they were just beginning to build a train to California. He went to one of 4 Russian Orthodox churches in America, in San Francisco. He was paid $6,000 in 1890. You can imagine it was probably $1 million back then, to bring over his parishioners and the faithful into Russian Orthodoxy. Now notice this year, it's not 1917 yet, this is 1890. The Tsar was sending, there were 4 Russian Orthodox churches, and they were all on the west coast, Alaska. The Russians were sending missionaries over, they were calling them missionaries, over to Alaska, and then to San Francisco. And they gave Alexis Toth the promise, if you come over to us, if you switch jurisdiction, and this is not switching to jurisdiction, it's called proselytization. When there's a financial incentive, that's not evangelization. That's not conversion. It's called grabbing the dollar. So this was a Russian church. That's the same thing that we do in our Byzantine Rite. In the same language, which is Old Church Slavonic, our common people from the mines did not know the difference between a Catholic and an Orthodox. Where would you go to church? In a church where you had to pay for a dozen eggs to the priest, to keep him there, and to pay for his salary, to pay for the church, or go to the Russian church where the Tsar was paying for everything. You didn't get asked for anything. This started in March 25th. Isn't that something? March 25th, 1890, Alexis Toth and his whole parish in Minneapolis fell into heresy. Into schism, excuse me. I want to be precise by what I'm saying. By 1916, and this is how this is phrased. I can't believe it. The Roman Catholic Church had lost 163 uniate parishes, that's how they call us, the people who united with Rome, with more than 100,000 faithful to the Russian missionary diocese. In 1994, the Russian Orthodox Church that they had joined, because after the revolution and everything, they became the Orthodox Church in America, OCA. And they changed their affiliation with Russia during the revolution and have existed now. And we've begun filled with former Greek Catholics in their proselytization. That's a hard word to say for some reason. They were proselytizing, it's easier to say. And it's very interesting because the World Church's Council forbids proselytizing. You can't do this. And the sin that John Ireland committed, you read a biography written by a parish priest who was a PhD in history, wrote this wonderful book about him. He was really a mess as an archbishop, sad to say. You could read about him. He really fought. He was trying to help his own Irish people, and he messed with them, too. He was trying to bring them out. He had no sense. And it was just plain ignorance that caused this schism when you come down to it. But it's a schism and it's a severing nonetheless. And it meant that people were stolen from one church and brought into another church using the Byzantine usage. And it exists even today, this difference, because the parish church in Bayonne in 1916 fell to these schismatics. It took 25 years before Their center was really in Wilkes-Barre and in northeastern Pennsylvania, where all the mines are. They had great success there, and that's where the majority of our first immigrants landed, Ruthenians and Ukrainians, for that matter. So, in 1916, they get around to coming to Bayonne. I don't know what took them so long, but what they did to Mary and Teresa and her family is just reprehensible. They pushed them out of their parish house. They weren't living in the rectory, they were in a parish home that was rented out to immigrants. By then, the father, Alexander, had enough money earning that he was able to buy a house on 15 East 44th Street, right around the corner from St. Vincent de Paul. So, where did the family move and where did they go to church? They were pushed out of church, they were shunned, they were pushed out by their own kind. It reminds me, again, of what happened with this encounter in Minneapolis 25 years earlier, but it has a different outcome. And it's wonderful to behold. Mary and Teresa takes care in 1916. They move to 44th Street. Her mother dies in 1918. Where can they go to bury her? They went to the Ukrainian church in Bayonne, which is on the next block over from ours, on 26th Street. They were able to bury her from there. And it's possible she may have died of the Spanish flu. So we have a cause for COVID. I was always trying to prove this, but we never found out from the health department whether she passed because of that or not. And anyway, Teresa was taking care of her mother, and then they moved to 44th Street. And where was Mary and Teresa at this point? She was going to Holy Communion in 1913 in the Byzantine Church when she was 12 years old, 12 years young. We usually give out communion, Holy Communion, Chrismation, and baptism nowadays, but in her day it was when they're at the age of reason. She went to high school, and then she moved up there with her father and her brother, and whatever sisters were there, and she started going to daily communion at St. Vincent de Paul, which was right around the corner. And it's not the present church that's there nowadays, this splendid stone edifice that's there on 46th Street, but she went there, and it's just awesome. She was well received. 1919, Father Joseph Dolan comes. Father Joseph was a consummate Irishman. He was born in the old Sana. He traveled back and forth. And when he was made pastor in 1919, I'm sure he delighted with the First Lady, Teresa, was coming to church every day. She worked in the rectory office. She was a member of the sodality. She became totally imbued and nourished in her faith by the Roman lung of the church, with the Irish blessings on it. And it's just a delight to me, because I came to Bayonne well before I was assigned there, because I knew the Harry Clark windows. If you don't know Harry Clark, look up his windows in Ireland. There's at least 50 to 100 churches that he has designed. He's the master of the Celtic Byzantine. They look like icons. I was mesmerized. I'm totally mesmerized by them. And perhaps that's the next talk that we'll give next season will be about that church and the history of the Diocese of Newark and how this Irish pastor took so much care and concern in taking care and nourishing, providing for the Catholic faith. So what do Mary and Teresa and her brother, I usually call her BMT, so if you hear me saying that, that's the abbreviation for her Blessed Mary Teresa. She went to the College of St. Elizabeth in College Station for her college degree. Now, this is a woman in 1923, graduated summa cum laude with a degree, a bachelor's degree in literature. She was completely articulate in English, and I'm sure, even though we don't know for sure, but I'm sure she spoke fluent Slovak for her parents, because they didn't learn English as immigrants. And and they spoke that, and she practiced the Byzantine church. So after she graduated, and her father died in 1922, I believe I have the right date, I might be off on the date a little bit. She was there, and she was considering to go after her graduation. So that would make her earlier going to the college anyway. In 1922, she was deciding to become a nun, and she wanted to become a Carmelite. Our order of nuns in Pittsburgh were not ready yet in Uniontown. Our seminary wasn't built or even thought of in 1920s, so they went to the Roman Rite. Father Charles went to the seminary in Darlington, Immaculate Conception, which later was incorporated here, under Mother Seton. God bless Mother Seton. The motherly care that she gives even to this day to provide for us as a mother of faith, teaching, understanding, dispelling the ignorance that we have. So what do EMT and her brother do at the high holy days? And this is something that would not be written about in Roman books, because they don't know about our customs, that reveal her Byzantine nature. And there's a very important clue that she gives about Christmas, the birth of our Lord, on December 25th, because we have a domestic church celebration in the home as part of our ritual for Christmas. That's not done except in the Polish churches. We have what is called a Holy Supper, where all the family members gather together at the table. There's 12 dishes served that are usually meatless, at least. Some of them are dairyless as well. We leave an empty table setting. We have a whole ritual of songs, church songs to be sung, intervening the different courses. It begins with a blessing by the father of the family, blessing the children. The youngest boy is to go look outside to see the first star, and then the meal can begin. This whole ritual is Passover Seder. I don't know how, I have not been able to find out as of yet how this surfaced in our people in the mountains, in the Carpathians. But it's so rich in symbolism that we would do this way before you go to church. You have the sacred meal. I was talking with my Jewish dentist 2 weeks ago at emergency root canal. And I was talking to them, wonderful Jews who taught us, you know. And I said, God bless America. We have Irish, Jews, Romans, Byzantines, Ukrainians, everybody, and we don't kill each other here. You know, we have this wonderful country that we live in, that we have this freedom. I was talking to them about, you know, the ceremony that we do on Christmas. I said, it's a Savior. And he said, you know, Father, every Friday at Sabbath, I bless my children. I said, that's the same thing we do on Holy Supper. The father, the head of the family, sometimes it'll be a mother, will bless each of the children by name and say, may all the things in the next year be covered. We give them a piece of garlic covered in honey. May all the bad things that happen to you be covered with honey, with sweetness. And then you get a piece of bread, leavened bread. And may all the good things be blessed with even more good things. This ritual is done even to this day. Many of our people in the United States have pushed this aside, but I resurrected it in Buffalo with my priest brothers. I had a great cadre of priest brothers there. And we have the Holy Supper the Friday before Christmas, even if it was a week away, because no priest is available on Christmas Eve, you know, to have a meal. So we got together, and they had a Polish cook. So 5 of us priests did, and we adapted some of the meal. Some of the priests like me don't like, you know, lima beans was a favorite dish, and I hate them. So the priest said, can we have macaroni and cheese? And it was an Irishman, of course. So I said, of course. And I would sing, and I'd give them all a piece of garlic. They remember to this day what this is. If you ask any of our children, they'll remember growing up with that experience. After the meal, the family would go out dressed in costumes in the villages, and they were shepherds mainly, and they would go out singing. And I hate to call them carols because they're church songs. They're not Christmas carols. They are church religious songs that talk about the meaning of Christmas. Anyway, there's a long description about something that we do on Christmas that many of you may have never heard about, but that B&T and her brother were very familiar with. What does she write? For the first Christmas when she entered the novitiate, she writes a play. What does she call the play? The 70th week. I said, what in God's name is a 70th week? And how did a 25, 26-year-old know that? So I saw Jimmy Sparrow about this. He came to my rescue. He said, oh, Joe, that's what Roman Catholics read on Christmas Day in the Roman Martyrology. The 70th week is the prophecy of Daniel, chapter 9, I believe, that talks about the coming of the Messiah. I'm thinking to myself, how did this 25-year-old ever get that idea into her head? You know, except by divine infusion. She wrote a whole play. It's not that long, but it's the whole same idea as what we would do in the home. But she did it for the nuns. And so she has the last line in Act 3, or Act 2, Scene 3, is the prophecy of Isaiah, which is the signature hymn for Byzantine Catholics for Christmas. God is with us, give ear all you nations, be humble, for God is with us. Or we would sing, Snami bo, razumite jazycy, I pokariajtes ja, jako snami bo. And our grand compliment for that feast would be verses of the Isaiah prophecy intermingled with singing that song. And here she puts it in a play for the nuns in the convent. They all said, what's that weirdo doing? You know, when the Irish nuns were there in the convent with her. But that's fine. She was teaching in the spirit of Cyril and Methodius. Her parents imbued her with the energy of our ancestors of spreading the faith without even consciously thinking about it. She was evangelizing the faith. Evangelizing means preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ and his mercy. And that's what's so important about B&T and her brother, Father Charles. And so I just highlight that specific incident. And another one is the celebration of Pascha, which is a whole another issue that we can get into. But I just want to cite one incident in her life. When she was in the novitiate, she had a classmate, Margaret Conklin, who lived in Ansonia, Connecticut, who didn't become a nun. And she was writing to her, and Margaret was going to write her a letter during Lent and said, this boss that I have is a pain in the neck, and she was writing all this complaint about, what am I going to do? I can't put up with all this stuff and everything. And you know what me and Teresa does? She says, and Sister Maureen has these postcards in the back. Me and Teresa painted this size, it's not even bigger than 2 inches. I was at her archive last week, and I saw the original. 2 inches by 1 inch wide card of violets. A bunch of violets. And she, on the inside of the card, she says, Sister Mary Teresa, pick this for Margaret Conklin. And then in the inside, there's a little plastic with a real violet, but very well decomposed by now, that she picked on the convent grounds in Convent Station. And she sent this as a consolation. She says, may you receive the Lord's consolations and be able to, he'll fortify you, you'll be able to put up with it. You'll be able to bear wrongs patiently with which is a work of mercy. And so we have that as a symbol. Art history. I had all these courses in art history. I never knew about violets. Violets symbolize the Trinity. Violets symbolize the first flower of the resurrection of Christ. So that's a paschal memory. So my dream is to plant violets in all the front yards of St. John's in Bayonne so that we don't have to mow the lawn either. So it's a beautiful remembrance of her. It's also her color. So we're inviting everybody to come on May 7th. We're going to have a pilgrimage in her honor at the convent where she's buried, and her tomb is there. On May 7th, Sunday, you're all invited to come. It starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we're encouraging people to wear violet for that. So I was with the nuns last week, so I was telling them, I said, wear your violet sweater, sister, for that, because that's her symbol. And they all went, oh, they were so delighted with that. And that's what invoked this painting of this icon. This is very recent that we have of her, with her prayers at the application. Be sure to pick up yours after the talk. Sister has them in the back there for your complimentary. With violets around the frame, because they symbolize the resurrection of our Lord. And the iconographer was delighted to do this. In any event, when you come to 1955, and her book, well, before she died, she was asked by her spiritual director to write 26 conferences for a retreat that he was going to give. Only he and the Mother Superior knew about it. She was not to tell anybody, so we have her handwritten text in the book called Greater Perfection. These texts, and that's available in the back as well, is a wonderful meditation on evangelizing the Catholic faith. And it's universal. It's not just for East and West, it's for everybody. Not only for Armenians, but for Ukrainians and Americans and Peruvians and Chinese and whoever. And I say Chinese because there's an interesting comment about her support of nuns. After she gives this retreat, the priest gives the retreat. She, in December, has an episode of tonsillitis. She is operated on for that, comes back to the convent, and this is 1926, and she comes back to the convent, and the nuns who are in charge of the novitiate are known as, I'm sorry to say, Sister Maureen, but we probably agree, they're kind of bully. They won't put up with any nonsense from these juniors coming in and thinking they got away. They thought she was feigning her illness, and she couldn't pick up her head up and walk up the stairway in the convent, in the novitiate. And she was burdened with teaching in a boarding school, and then coming to novitiate prayers and doing chores around. So she was quite busy. In March, which was Lent, and she was born during Lent, as you can imagine. March 25th is always Lent, no matter what you get it, unless it falls on Good Friday, very rarely. She was born on 26th, and she was in for Lent. She did her final Lent on the face of the earth, suffering with acute appendicitis, myocarditis. And in April, I think it was April 2nd, she received in danger of death. Her brother ordered the Father Benedict to bestow upon her the major orders, her final profession, which she received 5 weeks before she passed on May 8th, which was Mother's Day and a Sunday. And also, in the calendar that we kept at the time, Julian calendar, that was St. Thomas Mercy Sunday. So that's a very important characteristic to learn about her. She passed on Mercy Sunday. That didn't develop until 2000, so that we have. In the meantime, 1950s, her book was translated into Chinese by professors here at Seton Hall, the Greater Perfection. Can you imagine? The Sisters of Charity were in China, in Hunan, Havak and Hunan is the name of the book. You want an interesting read about sisters dedicated to evangelizing an Oriental country, right? They were sending Roman nuns and they had in their kitchen a picture of Miriam Teresa. It was just astounding. I was reading the book one day and I said, oh my goodness. So anyway, they translated the book. The professor from here, Professor Wu and Siu from it was called the Oriental Department, now it's called the Asian Department. When he was translating the book from English, he said, English was blasé. When I translated it into English, into Chinese, it had this whole flavor of the Orient. And it portrayed the fragrance of someone from the Oriental church in the writings. It was like reading incense in a Buddhist or a Taoist temple. And I said to myself, wouldn't that be interesting if Miriam Teresa became the apostle of unity from communism to the Chinese? And I said, I would like to open up that proposition today. Anyway, in the Ruthenian Church, we have been struggling along through the centuries. I'd like to end with 1999, which was an important date in our Ruthenian Church. And that was the 75th anniversary of the first bishop that we had, Bishop Takac from Israel. And there was a big celebration on October 3rd. I was there. I was in Buffalo and drove down to Pittsburgh. And we had 2,700 people in the Pittsburgh domed arena there. And at that event was an extraordinary pronouncement by an Irishman, Cardinal Keeler. He was the head of the Catholic Church in 1999. He was the Archbishop, Cardinal Archbishop of Baltimore, which is the see of preeminence in America, not New York, not Washington. Baltimore, okay? He got up at our liturgy and banquet following, and he remarked, when the first priests and people came from the Carpathian Mountain region of Central Europe, with their different liturgical language and way of worship, their canonical practices at variance of the Latin Church, many of the Latin clergy and laity both were confused and also fearful. Among other things, they were afraid that the new ways, really very old ways, sanctioned by St. Cyril and Methodius and the Apostolic See, would give the anti-Catholics more ammunition for the discrimination already practiced with such bitterness and abandon. The unchristian reaction of the Latin leaders and people of a century ago must be on our minds today. And I shout this out. In the spirit of the Great Jubilee, Latin Catholics ask for pardon as we recall the suffering, pain, and loss experienced by our brothers and sisters from the Eastern Catholic Churches, Catholics, during those years. Did I say it loud enough? It was one sentence. We all stood up and applauded him. I had to scream it out because I said, don't people pay attention to what was being said? This was monumental. He apologized for all of the wrongs. What are we doing to accept that? So, in the intervening year, in 1999, they ended the imposition of celibacy on our priests, and we are allowed to have married clergy. We've had a couple of married American clergy. We're not allowed to announce it in the intervening years. And in the year of Jubilee 2000, we have all of these wonderful things happening with the resurgence of our church in the homelands, freed of communism yoke, and they're immigrating again. I don't know what immigration is the 5th or the 6th or whatever. And we have married clergy, which form, I would say, 25 to 30% of our eparchies right now in the United States. We have married clergy. priests with kids, PKs, which I think is wonderful for America, because the Protestants are always talking about PKs. So now we have Catholics that are PKs. So what I really want to stress as I close this discussion is the idea that we need to be interlocutors and we have to be people of rapprochement. Rapprochement means in French harmony between East and West. And I take my spur from that, from St. John Paul II's wonderful Light of the East, where he's talking about the richness of the East, but also that the West has to learn about that and the East has to learn about the West. There has to be harmony between the two Eastern churches, and not to see our churches, the Eastern churches, as the bridge between Orthodoxy and Catholicism, because that's not what it is. We're supposed to express this rapprochement, and it begs upon us to be interlocutors. And in Slavish, it's a long word, in Ukrainian and Slavic, perasmish, speaking among groups and different groups and bringing them together is a wonderful word, combination word. And to work on evangelizing, we have to evangelize ourselves. We have to teach ourselves what the gospel message, and to realize that we as Catholics have a rich culture, and maybe we should be, as Byzantine Rite people, we should be sending missionaries to China, because it's more akin to their ritual with incense. I know I have Koreans up in Buffalo. They love coming to our liturgy. They bow, they don't genuflect. Just our ritual differences account for great richness instead of conformity. So I'd like to conclude my remarks by, in the spirit of G.K. Chesterton, who I loved his sense of humor. Oh my gosh, he was like an Irishman wannabe. From some of the things I read about him. But I'm going to paraphrase somebody else besides him. Mark Twain, an American great author who was very well traveled and very ornery at times. But he wrote in his Innocents Abroad book, I'm going to change the word from traveler to evangelize. Evangelization is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness. And many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquitted by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all of one's lifetime. Isn't that great? Amen. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Father Bertha, for this splendid talk, actually, and for bringing both the Latin tradition of our church and also Byzantine. I've always been the oddball, when I tell people, yes, I'm Byzantine Catholic. They say, what? So you're not Catholic? You're not Orthodox? What the hell are you? So there was always this, you have to go and explain to people what you are, where your ritual come from, and so on and so forth. And again, Father Bertha, you made me think a lot, because we talked about Jubilee here, right? And we are going towards a Jubilee 2025. And during that Jubilee, Easter is for both churches, the Orthodox Church and the Latin Church, on the same day. So I really would like, more conversation here at City Hall, making City Hall this hub of unity and also knowing each other better. So the Jubilee of year 2025 is when Easter is on the same day. So the Lord is calling us to reflect on this. Pretty significant, right? It doesn't happen very often, actually. And just another comment that came to my mind. I visited a group of students, City Hall students, to Italy this month, actually, during spring break. And there were some of the kids, because Generation G, they are very much, Z rather, they are very much towards the authentic, liturgy and authentic church teaching. Monasticism, which is one of the topics of my expertise that I have taught with the great Professor R here for the honors program, always fascinated students, monasticism, especially Eastern monasticism, obviously. And some of my students in Italy, they went to, and participated actually at the traditional mass. They found this, parish in Rome actually that celebrated the old traditional mass. And I'm sure you know all the divisions that are among us Catholics about this, which is very unfortunate. People that want to leave the church because what Vatican II brought to the liturgy, etc. And I don't want to enter into this, but my students were fascinated with that. They said, "Oh, Professor, why don't we have this in the Latin Church?" I said, "Then come to the Byzantine Catholic Church because we have that tradition." So. Yes, that's another thought. So thank you again, Father Bertha. Now we'll get some questions. But before asking the question, if you can introduce yourself, because I see some new faces here actually that joined Catholic Studies in this lecture. So please, the floor is open.
Just make a following comment to what you alluded to, the future. I think some of the things that we should be doing in common is that all Roman and Byzantine or Eastern priests should be bi-ritual, as we call it. Automatically, never mind this change of rite business. We're fully Catholic, we should be able to go and fluent in both liturgies, especially nowadays when we have a crisis in the clergy supply. We have all of these married priests, and they're receiving the same salary that I do. I don't know how they can support 3 kids. And they could use even just the monetary recompensation for serving as priests. One of the great lessons I learned at being bi-ritual in a mission of mercy where they didn't pay you. All they did pay was with a smile and a thank you. And that was so rewarding to me. To be there among people. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm not one or the other to the exclusion of the other. I'm both. And I have numerous opportunities in the Roman rite parishes, especially St. Gregory the Great, which is right around the corner from me. One of the catechetical directors of religious education used to bring the 5th grade class in to our church around the corner for a Byzantine liturgy every year. We had like 25 kids. I had more than in my congregation come with the 5th grade class. They would write notes back to me and say, "The communion is cool," because we gave unto 2 species. And expose people of the Catholic Church to another aspect of the Catholic Church. And we're not all conformed to the same thing. So I think that should be a mandate. In all seminaries, both masses should be taught, both liturgies should be taught and how to celebrate them. I think our calendar should be reunited and joined together because we're Catholics. I don't see on our calendars any attempt to put North American. We had with Bishop Judson, and I didn't speak about it because I wanted to hurry over it, but Bishop Judson, our Archbishop at the time, spoke at the liturgy on that October date. And he was the one that was the prophet of the future. Because he said, we're not a church in the diaspora. And we all understand that word as Byzantine. We're not a diaspora. We are a church here, and we are to evangelize. We're not here just to be for our self-glorification. And Archbishop Kosik, in his unique way, taught us to, learn the American idiom, become fluent with, and that means for us, American Catholics, Roman Catholics, to Byzantines, And I was always very well received, and my years at Buffalo are my treasure. because of the solicitude, the nourishment that the Roman Catholic, I mean, I would sit there sometimes for 5 hours for confessions of the poor. And it taught me so many valuable lessons about being a priest. I said, I'm a Catholic priest. I could practice the sacraments with Catholics. I don't have to ask for permission for that, but nowadays you do. I have to have permission to go to a Roman Catholic church to stand at the altar. There's craziness in this world. There's absolute craziness to me. And please don't take that what it is. I think it's already there.
Yes, please. I'm just thinking about all the other rites that are also Catholic, such as Melkites, Maronites.
Armenians.
Okay. And I think fathers from the say the priest should learn all of them.
I'm sure.
Oh, that's a lot. I mean,
Sure.
And it would it necessarily be, I hate to use the word like authentically whatever the other rite is. You know what I'm saying?
But I think we Byzantines pushed the envelope because we were the first ones to come to another country outside of our homeland. You know, I think I could say that, well, especially in the English-speaking world here in America, we Byzantines were the first ones to push the buttons. And our intentions weren't really to evangelize America. Our intentions were to make money, which is not wrong, and bring it back and support the family, which is fine. But now, since '99, after Cardinal Keeler's magnificent apology, we have become evangelizing church because he has asked that to us. In fact, we had an icon at my behest, and we could give a talk about that too. We had an icon created of Christ the Evangelizer. And it was from an Armenian, Talmudorian Armenian manuscript. The Armenians were the Eastern painters of manuscripts from the year 100. They were illustrating every single stroke of the sacred scriptures in their language. And their manuscript in the Mantanam in Yerevan in Armenia has all of these manuscripts of the sacred scriptures illustrated with icons. And that's where I found an icon of Christ the Evangelizer. And Archbishop Jetson went berserk when he saw that. He had it hanging, we had a booklet about that. So, I mean to get that out into the curriculum. So, you know, we as Byzantines need to get our act together too and speak about who we are. And be given the opportunity to do that is wonderful. Through Seton Hall, through Dr. Inez here, and through the fathers in the seminary here, we deeply appreciate that voluntary. I had that same reception when I was in Buffalo, and the Roman Catholic. They would have various points of information sessions, especially during Great Lent, where they have a period of time talk about icons, talk about this, talk about married clergy, and so forth, and our rituals are different. Just so that people would be acquainted with them. And the seminary does too. Here at Seton Hall Seminary, Father James Spada was here, and he always brought up a Byzantine aspect because he's bi-ritual as well. And that's what that means. You have to have special permission to do that. And I really think we need to smooth that out a little bit easier, instead of making it so canonically stubborn or rigid. That we need to allow, and bishops should be allowing Byzantine and Roman priests to interchange, especially Byzantines to go to Roman churches and celebrate the Mass, because the Roman Mass is, I honestly say this to the Romans, I said, Joe, why don't you learn our liturgy? It's so easy for you compared to what you do. And it's true. But I had my practice too. I would be preaching to 400 people at a Mass. I never had that many people on a Byzantine liturgy. And it was wonderful. I was even on TV on EWTN back in 2000 with another priest talking about the light of the East. And we did all these programs together. So, this interlocutor business, it needs to zoom up a little bit. We have all of these things at our hands now. And thank goodness, such a university like this is open to receiving this. We had Byzantine centers, they've closed, the Jesuits. The Jesuits were always, fostering our union with the Catholic Church. They caused it in 1646. For us in Uzhhorod, they have the Rusicum in Rome, which is, from the Russian Byzantine rite, the Melkites are Byzantine rite, they're Arabic. So between us and the Byzantine, it's a little bit difficult because of our chant system. So there's a little bit of a difficulty with that because, as you can understand, in different countries, they have different modes of music. And so even between our Ruthenian church and the Ukrainian church, there's a whole different set of chants that we have to study and know about singing. So it gets complicated. And,
So any other questions?
I have a question. Thank you so much, Father Bertha. Blessed Miriam, where is she in the process of becoming a saint? Like, does she?
Okay, I didn't mention that too. In 1964, a young boy in the 3rd grade named Michael Menzer, excuse me, thank you, was being taught by Sisters of Charity in Teaneck, and he was diagnosed with macular degeneration, blind. He was always sent home with a companion from school, but one day the nuns didn't have a companion or something. They said, here, take a holy card of Sister Miriam Teresa with a piece of her hair on it, and she'll guide you home. He received his sight back on the way home. The mother said, how do you know how to get home? He says, I can see. And his healing was the miracle that was needed to bring her cause to beatification. So 8 years ago in the cathedral in Newark, she was beatified in a Roman ceremony with our Byzantine bishop present there. And so we're coming to the 9th anniversary. This October next year will be the 10th anniversary of her beatification. So we have these holy cards. We'll ask you to take them and pray them every day. She's extremely powerful. I'm praying her for all kinds of reasons, and she responds. I know she's smiling at me. We have a relic of her hair, a curl of her hair, and it reminds me of my own grandmother, who would have been the same age as her. And my grandmother always had that permed hair like that, And so when I take that relic out, we have services every last Saturday of the month in Bayonne at St. John's, if you would like to come and join us. We start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Bayonne, and we do these prayers. I take the relics out, and people come and pray for her intercession to create another miracle that will be able to make her canonized as a saint. So we're still waiting for that. So thank you for bringing that.
Thank you so much.